We are live. And I know that because it comes up and says you are live. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This is such a special event for all of us. Melody is such a good friend of the store, and we're just thrilled for her. But Melody especially picked this day because today is World Prematurity Day. And we are excited to welcome author, journalist, longtime store friend, past book club leader, Melody Schreiber. And she's going to share from her new book, What We Didn't Expect, Personal Stories About Premature Birth. And Melody will be joined by author and literary agent, Eric Smith, who is also a Novatine alum. So many, many store connections tonight. So we're excited to have both of you here. 10% of the babies born in the U.S. are preemies, which was a number that I found very, very high. I did not know that. But that one word preemie encompasses a wide range of medical and cultural experiences. And while there are textbooks and medical books and the occasional memoir, to date, there's been no one book that collects personal experiences from the many people who have parented, cared for, or been preemies themselves. And What We Didn't Expect, Melody brings together a collection of acclaimed writers and thinkers to share their diverse stories of having or being premature babies. This moving and heartfelt book is a crucial and informative resource for anyone who has or is about to have the experience of dealing with a premature birth. Publishers Weekly said, despite the often troubling emotions covered, this collection will predominantly leave readers with a sense of inspiration and gratitude. Any parent struggling with the fear and uncertainty that can accompany premature birth will find comfort and inspiration. So that's there is much more to that wonderful review, but I wanted to select those parts. As I mentioned, Melody is a health and science journalist who's reported from every inhabited continent. I am constantly in awe of the very many unusual and unique places that she does reports from. Her articles, essays, and reviews have been published by The Washington Post, The Guardian, Wired, The Atlantic, Pacific Standard, The New Republic, NPR, USA Today, and so many more. Her fiction's been published in District Lines, Magical, an anthology, and Abundant Grace. She also has a blog, Not a Doctor, which breaks down the news and scientific studies about COVID-19 and tells us what all of that means in a way that we can actually understand it. So if you haven't seen it yet, you'll want to check that out. Melody's joined by young adult author and literary agent Eric Smith, an agent at PS Literary. Eric has worked on award-winning and New York Times best-selling titles. He is also an author. His books include The Girl and the Grove, Don't Read the Comments, which came out in January of 2020, and the forthcoming You Can Go Your Own Way, which is tentatively scheduled for September 2021, I believe. Everything is tentative in 2021, so... If you have any questions or comments for Eric or Melody throughout the talk, please feel free to put them in the comments section and we'll do our best to answer. Enough of me. Let's turn it over to Melody and Eric and any special guests that they might have nearby them.
All right. Thank you, Eileen. My special guest and personal assistant had a pressing matter upstairs, but he did want to say hello. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having us. One More Page is one of the places closest to my heart in the whole world, and it's just been a dream of mine to have an event here with you. I miss the store, but I'm getting my own little, here we go, miniature library, you know, little One More Page from home. And also thank you to Eric for joining us and also for representing the book and for seeing the promise and the importance of the collection and just being a passionate advocate. And yeah, everyone at Melville for all the amazing work they've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is my pleasure. I can't wait to dig into all of that and the why of this book and how it got here. I think it's such a fascinating discussion. And one thing that I was like smiling during all the introductions, because when you read the back of this book, you know, you read the jacket copy, so much of it is like from like our original pitch letter when we were sending this book out. And I also love hearing your bio, because whenever I would talk to people about you and describe your bio and like talk about you as an author and your platform and all the places you've written for, I would use there's like an animated GIF from like that movie Sleepy Hollow where they like throw the scroll out into the thing, it just rolls out, and it's just like a long list of things. And that's you. That's you're that scroll. It's just a nonstop list of all these places you've written for, and it's so amazing. It's such a joy to get to work with you.
Oh, thank you. It's weird to hear about your own bio, because I'm just like, me? I am but a humble typer.
Well, you did that. You did all that.
Well, I didn't do all of it. I want to also, the contributors to this book were just fantastic. And, I have to say, when I first said that I wanted to do an anthology, I got some private messages from friends saying like, "Hey, this is a great idea. I'm so excited you're going to do it. By the way, anthologies are a pain. Like when you're dealing with the like pesky contributors, if you ever need to vent, I'm here." And I have to say, everyone was amazing. Like there was no one who I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like you're not turning things on time. Everyone was like, okay, I'm going to work all weekend and get this to you. And they did. Which, if you know writers, is basically that's the miracle. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure to get to know everyone.
Yeah. So, what was that process like? Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting all these people and wrangling them all together? Like, because I feel like a lot of them came from like very unexpected places.
Yeah. So some people I knew who, had encouraged me from the beginning, like Tyrese Coleman was one of the first people I got in touch with. And she encouraged me to do the book. And so I was like, well, I'll do it if you're in it too. And then there were other people I hadn't realized had preemies, like Representative Pramila Jayapal. I read in an essay in the New York Times that her first child was born very premature, and so I was really thrilled to be able to work with her. And then other people I think came over the transom via Twitter because you did a great job of uplifting the call for pitches, and it got shared on a bunch of parenting groups on Facebook. And so it was just really cool. Even the people who didn't make it into the final version, which still maybe is like the saddest thing about this, is I wanted everyone to be involved and to have as many perspectives as possible. But even so, I got to know like new friends and other people who had experiences with prematurity, and that was so valuable and such a cool experience.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to like a big part of what this book is saying, how it's like 10% of the babies born in the US are premature, and like you kind of don't know, right? Like I don't know, like I feel like that's not like a conversation you go up to like a new friend and say like were you a premature baby? Like that's not a thing that you would say.
People put it in their Twitter bio.
Yeah. So I think it's amazing how all these people just some of them came out of Twitter, some of them came from Facebook, and here they all are.
Yeah, it's cool to have the whole gang together in one book. And yeah, the 10% thing. So I had no idea that premature birth was so common until I had a preemie, and I was really feeling like, God, how did I fail at this like most basic human task of just like birthing a child? And then I looked it up, and I really did like a double take, like 10%. Wait a second, 1 in 10. 1 in 10, and then it started to make a lot of sense, because as I started posting about our experiences just among friends and family, a lot of people started reaching out and be like, oh, I was a preemie 30 years ago. I was a miracle baby, or, my sister or my cousin, or it touches everyone. And that's really, it's a little surprising, but it was really gratifying to see.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for a book like this to exist, right? I mean, people need these voices to turn to.
So I had a question for you. When this came into your inbox, what about this project spoke to you? Oh
boy, I mean, so much about it. Like I'd been following you for a long time, so I was familiar with your writing. But it's funny. So like, yeah, I feel like you see like a lot of agents and publishing people say things on social media like, oh, I like this project, but I couldn't relate to it, or I like this particular story, but I couldn't relate to the voice. And I feel like that's the wrong way to go about doing business, right? Like, it's not your job to relate to the character or relate to the voice. It's your job to consider who the audience is, and try to relate to the audience and think about what the audience wants. And that's what this experience was like for me. I saw the story, I saw the need for the story, and I thought about all the people that would benefit from having this book, and that's what grabbed me the most. Like, I don't have a premature baby. Like, I haven't had that experience, that no one in my family has. But like, I knew that there are people that were going to need this book. So that's what made me jump on it right away. I was like, oh, this can help people. Let's go do the work.
That's what like was so appealing about working with you, is even before, the reason I queried you was because I was like, he's a great agent. He knows so many people, but he'll understand, like, he'll be passionate about it. And I knew you wouldn't take it on if you didn't believe in it, that you wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, here's a commercial market for it. And no shade on agents who operate that way, but I really wanted someone who was going to see this as like a thing to help people and like kind of keep that in the forefront. Yeah. And I also, you've also edited anthologies or Welcome Home.
Yeah. I've dabbled in anthologies too, and I forget if I had. I'm not sure if that breastfeeding cookbook had sold before we worked together. Was that out? I don't remember.
I think it had been announced.
Yeah, maybe.
It wasn't out. It was right around when I queried you that it came out, but when I was writing the proposal, it wasn't out yet. And I only remember that because I really wanted that book because I was a nursing mom.
But that's like another example, right? Like, that's not an experience for me, but it's an experience for like other people. And yeah, like, it's fine that some agents don't operate that way, but I think more should.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to talk about your anthology too, because this isn't just about prematurity. I think like what was the process like? Tell me what's different from being an anthology editor and sort of like seeing the bigger picture as an agent and as someone who's kind of publicizing the book.
Oh boy, that's tricky. Because I feel like both kind of work the same way, right? Like, in whether you're an agent like trying to sell an anthology or a writer trying to make one, there are a couple like key things that have to happen, right? Like, you have to have that balance of like big name voices in the collection in order to get it over that hump of like, well, how are we going to sell this? Like, that does become a thing. Like, as passionate as you might be for a project and thinking about who needs it, you also have to think about how you're going to make it get there to where it needs to be. So that's something I think about in my author life, and something I think about in my agent life. And like, you did an awesome job of getting some fantastic voices in this, and you're a fantastic voice of your own, so that one really wasn't a problem. Let me see, what else do I think about when it comes to that? You try to think about being as diverse and inclusive as you can. You want the whole point of doing an anthology is to try to reflect more of the world in a single story, right? Like this collection is about premature birth, but you have it from a ton of different people, and that way you're reflecting lots of different experiences, lots of different people's experiences. And that's the great thing about anthologies. You get to bring all of that in. So yeah, big voices, lots of different voices. And I don't know, just a sense of, I like all the books that I work on, whether it's one I'm writing or one I'm representing, to have a sense of hope in it, and that's in this book, like, I remember, okay, fine, some inside baseball agent stuff. I remember when we were pitching this around and getting notes from editors that were like, oh, I don't see someone giving this to a person who just had a baby. Like, why would they give this book to them? And I was like, well, then you don't understand what this is for. So fine, I will take that pass. Because there's tons of hope in the book, and that's what's so important. So
when I heard that feedback, I mean, obviously I was like, you're wrong, but I don't want to work with someone who doesn't understand what the book is trying to do. Yeah. And for me, it was like, well, you might not want to give that to every pregnant woman, but you should have given it to me, the pregnant woman who is on bed rest, like, what do I do? Yeah. And it's so much more common than I think people really talk about. That's like, There are a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and also in my agent life, I like books that do like genre blending and are hard to explain where they belong. You know, I love that in fiction. I love books that are strange. And the challenging thing about this particular book is that it's like, well, is it a nonfiction essay collection from like literary voices, or is it a parenting book?
Yes.
You know, and
The answer is yes.
yeah, when people would ask me that, I'd be like, yes. It would be like my answer there. And I'm just really glad we found the exact right team for this book, you know, because and you know, and one thing that can be really hard as a writer, and I'm sure Melody, you understand this, is that like, you know, when you're pitching around a project that's so like deeply close to you, and you have people saying like, oh no, I don't get that. It can feel personal, right? It can feel like, okay, they're rejecting me and like who I am. And I'm glad we showed them all wrong, because you're awesome.
Yeah, all it takes is one yes, right?
Yes, I'm very much, for anyone listening, I'm very much like a Scorpio literary agent. So you get the soft stuff online, but I get very cranky when
I'm a Scorpio too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, you know, that saying, I don't want to be in any club that doesn't want me. Like, obviously, you don't know what's going on, which is, you know, what I tell myself is I'm like crying into my ice cream at night. But, you know, it's like you really do want to be working with the team that understands the vision for it and that understands the necessity for it. And so if you have an editor saying, I just don't get it, it's like, well, yeah, like then you're not the right one.
And we got the right one. I wonder if Ryan's here. I don't know, but Ryan, if you're here, you're great.
Ryan's so great. Oh my God, I love working with Ryan. Ryan Harrington. He was the editor at Melville House that shepherded the book. He's our greatest cheerleader. Just did an amazing job. Such a pleasure to work with. I wanted to go back to one of the things you said about hope, which I really liked. And this is again why I'm so glad we got to work together, because some people have said like, oh, like isn't that kind of a depressing topic? Like, should I get the tissues ready? And you know, yeah, there are some hard moments, there are some emotional moments to it, but for me, it is a story about like, look where we were, look where we've been, look where we are now. Even when people didn't get the ending that they were hoping for to their journey, there's still so much growth and personal transformation and sort of moving through some really difficult things. And for me, someone said, what was it like releasing a book in 2020? And I was like, this is the perfect time to release this book, because it's about the struggle of health challenges and crises and things where you feel like, is my family going to be able to hold together through this?
Yeah,
that's exactly what all these essays are about. And so I hope that even beyond the people who are interested in premature birth or maternal and child health, I think this is really about how to overcome crises and sort of how to come out of it stronger or different and really push through. So
yeah, absolutely. So what would you say is, you know, we're talking about hope and things being difficult, you know, like what was the most challenging thing about this collection for you?
About the collection?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So I guess for me, we did the book fairly quickly. Like from the time we got a yes to today, it was pretty quick. And I was really worried about asking everyone to turn around their essays so quickly. And in some cases, some people who had initially been interested in the project weren't able to do it because it's 2020. And they have a lot going on. Totally understandable. And I was just really worried that I was asking too much. And I tried to be really respectful of people's time. And when they weren't able to make a deadline, that's totally cool. Like I felt like I was asking them for a favor in a lot of ways to carve this time out. Because I mean, even when you had work time before, maybe now your kids like home from daycare or from school, and suddenly every moment is extremely precious. So for me, I was a little stressed about having it all come together in time. But honestly, I mean, people turn things in early. I don't know how this is possible. They would say I got so carried away. Here's the draft. And, I'm just really lucky to have contributors who, I mean, some of them said, like, I wouldn't even get paid for this. Like, I just want this story to be out there. And I was just like, you're my people, because you see that it's really important for these stories to be out in the world.
Yeah. It was wild. But while you were talking, I clicked over to Pub Marketplace really quick because I was like, when did we announce this book? Because I remember, was it this year? And it was. Like, we announced it in April. And it came out like 2 weeks last year. Yeah, like, that's wild. So Melville House is they're good. They know how to get a book to come out when they want it to.
Yeah, when we were really in the thick of it, it's funny. I was looking at the stories. Sometimes I look at like the stories I was publishing and being like, this study came out in June. Why didn't I cover it? I'm like, oh, because I was going through edits. But yeah, it was a cool process. It never felt overwhelming though. I think because it was an anthology. It wasn't all on me. I hope the contributors didn't find it overwhelming, but. I mean, honestly, I feel like I have new best friends, which, I think for me, this book was actually really helpful in processing a lot of what happened to our family and to people I know. Sort of pulling it together and reading through people's experiences really, it showed me, some things were similar to our experiences. And so I could really be like, oh my God, yes. And then others were so different where I was like, wow, we didn't have to go through that. And now I see, a different perspective. And that was a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, but that's the experience people are going to have when they read the book, I think. Right? Yeah.
And you'd also mentioned something about how anthologies need to be diverse, or they should be diverse.
Yeah.
And someone who read the book said, I loved it, but what really surprised me was I kind of expected it to be literary essays in like a similar voice to mine, which I think my voice is probably pretty like MFA workshop. I guess hopefully in a good way.
Do you need my flat cap? Is that what you're saying right now?
Say what?
I said, do you need my flat cap?
Right. Yeah. Well, if we're critiquing the piece today, first of all, I want to start off with the positives. But I really wanted, I mean, in a book where you're talking about trying to show people like reflections of their experiences, for me to just only write about my experiences would have been pointless. And to find people who were similar to me in background or in experiences would have been like pointless. So I was really glad to be able to sort of pull people in and be like, okay, now we're totally changing gears. And one thing that I didn't expect, but it was one challenge, was putting the essays in order.
Oh, yeah.
In the table of contents. So I don't know if this was immediately apparent, but my working sort of structure was to do it kind of chronologically. So before birth, during birth, after, and then long after. So you feel like you're kind of going through this journey. And that was the only thing that made sense for me. But when you're reading it, it's like, okay, like now we're shifting. Now we go from sort of like being on the edge of tears to like, oh my God, was that a joke? Like this is the tonal shift. And that was a cool challenge. So we have a question.
Yeah, all right.
So from Eileen at one more page, it seems like such an intensely personal experience. Did the people who agreed to it know that you had also experienced it?
Oh.
Yeah. I think, when I put out the call on Twitter, I just said that I was editing this anthology. And then I followed up with everyone on email, and then if it seemed like it would be a good fit, we did phone calls for almost everyone. But I don't think I actually told people my story in most of those calls. Maybe I just assumed that they would know about, but I did find myself, like, when I was speaking with, I remember I was talking to Jonathan Friedman Coppage, and he was talking about realizing that his son, Langston, was aspirating. And aspirating means that when you're eating, you're also breathing in the formula or the milk into your lungs. And with babies, that the difference between the esophagus and the lungs, I mean, it's quite easy for that to happen. But it can be a really dangerous condition. You can basically get pneumonia. And when he said, I realized my son was aspirating because he wasn't really himself during the feeds, I was like, I know that feeling. I've been there. And then he said, and then we had to readmit him, which felt like a failure. Like they had to go back to the hospital. And you go back to the hospital and it's like, oh, like, why didn't you, you have all these feelings as a parent of just like, that you think everyone's judging you for not taking care of your baby when in fact, like, this is something that you are not going to be able to take care of on your own. And I also, our experience is very different, but I also was like, walking through the doors of the hospital to bring your baby back is such a difficult experience. And so, I was supposed to be interviewing him, I think, to be in the anthology, but I was just like, oh, I know how you feel. So yeah, it was great to make those connections. So, do you think I should read a little bit, or?
Yeah, that'd be lovely. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I'll start in the introduction, and then I'll flip ahead a little bit. So if you were at a previous event, hopefully this is new. When my water broke at 27 weeks and 4 days, everything changed. The drive to the hospital was nothing like I had anticipated for the past 7 months. My belly was not enormous. I was not racked by contractions. My husband drove nervously, cautiously, as fast as he could. The car was eerily silent. I kept my fingers spread over my stomach. Not yet, I told the son within. Hold on just a little longer. Please, baby. After checking into the hospital, I settled into strict bed rest and began consulting with neonatologists about their plans for our baby's care once he arrived. There was so much we were learning on the fly, so much we never thought we'd need to know, now filling our heads and our hearts. Although we hoped he would wait, every day in utero is comparable to 3 days of growth and development in the neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU. We knew the baby would not be full term. If by some miracle the pregnancy reached 34 weeks, when his lungs and brain and body would be nearly mature, I would be induced in order to avoid infection and other complications. It was unnerving to know ahead of time he was going to be premature, while at the same time knowing there was nothing we could do to make his entry into the world any safer or less complicated. All we could really do was hope he would wait just a little longer. And he did. Unlike the majority of pregnancies in which the water breaks early, a condition known as preterm premature rupture of membranes, my baby waited a full 18 days. He was born 29 weeks and 6 days into the pregnancy, and he was immediately taken to the NICU, where he would stay for more than 2 months. In the beginning, mama is aspirational, anticipatory. You clutch the slender pregnancy test. You watch the tiny pulsating heart on the ultrasound. You spread your fingers over your growing belly, and you think, I'm going to be a mom? It's thrilling in its distance. You have time still to become that person, to become someone else, someone's mother. They start calling you mom in labor and delivery. The techs, nurses, doctors, and specialists all hustle in. Hello, mom. Hi, mama. I'm here to draw bloods. Here are your meds. I wanted to chat with you about what will happen when your little one arrives. At first, confused, you look around for your own mother. Then you realize, no, it's you. Perhaps no one feels ready when the water breaks, when the contractions start, when the adoption paperwork comes through, but you really thought you'd have more time. You had another trimester to check off. Your baby registry, whenever you logged in, reminded you that delivery was a comfortable 12 weeks away. Mama, we confirmed it was amniotic fluid you felt. Mama, we're going to give you a shot to help the baby's lungs in case he arrives early. Mama, you're doing great. Just keep that baby inside you. It's a way to be friendly without being specific. After a while, you stop correcting them with your own name and you just nod. You suspect they also call you Mama to get you used to the idea of becoming a parent now, 3 months earlier than you expected. If only the rest of parenthood would come so effortlessly, simply by naming it. And when the baby does arrive, tiny as a hollow-boned bird, you hold him to your chest and you wish you could do this next part for him. If only you could change places. He could go home with his father, and you would gladly stay in the hospital for weeks, months, enduring the endless blood draws and procedures and tubes threaded through your whole body. A second set of lungs, a second circulatory system, a second life to keep you tethered to this one. But you're a mother now. Your first lesson is about separation. The doctor gently lifts the baby from your arms and sets him in his minuscule hospital bed to be wheeled off to intensive care.
Oh boy. I've only seen you read twice, for the first one. This one, each time you cry, it's so intense. These stories are so intense, and I'm so grateful they're on bookshelves right now.
Yeah, I have a friend who's like, you cry a lot, don't you? For me, like, it's not just about, the stress. It's also about the, these memories, like my son being born. It was just really such a happy time for me. And I think, if I were writing, someone asked me, if you were writing this essay now, what would you do differently with it? How would you tell it? Like, what is the distant, time passing done? And I do think it would be a more hopeful story, just because things have settled into this really amazing rhythm. And, my son is doing so well. He's very, very sad, trust me, to be missing this event. And so I think that if I were to write this again, I think I would focus more on the longer term of like bringing him home and like sort of becoming a family, and sort of really dialing in on that feeling that it doesn't matter how your family is formed. What matters is that you're here and together. I like that. And then not to talk too much here. But one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading that, one of the things I did, I went on bed rest and I pulled out my laptop and I was like, I got this. Like, I've always depended on books. There's got to be a million books out there. Like, I'm just going to spend the next, however many weeks. I was hoping to do 6 weeks in bed. It's like, I'll order every book about premature birth. And, there's a medical reference book called Preemies. Now one of the contributors has published a book that's a medical history of premature birth called Early. But I was like, where are the stories like that are going to tell me I'm going to be okay? even if okay is relative. Give me something here. And I didn't find much, so that's why I made this book. But even though I wasn't able to find books about premature birth, one of the next things that happened was I got a message from Eileen at One More Page, and she said, I heard that you're in the hospital. I checked to see how far away that is. As soon as the store is closed, I'm bringing you a bag of books to help you tide you over through bed rest. And I was like, Eileen, you're amazing. I already have like 10 books here that my husband brought from home. Just to have that community. That's why I love indies so much. It really helped me get through.
Well, sorry, I'm going to jump on for just a second there, because when you were reading that, I remember we kind of vicariously went through it with you is not correct, but we heard about it, and we were just thinking about you and talking about it all the time. And I was wondering, one of the things that it made me think about is that you are very upfront and open about it all, and shared the experience. But I would think for a lot of people, and maybe some of the people in your book, it was a very difficult thing to deal with the people around you, because people don't know what to say or what to do or whether they should reach out. And did any of the folks you deal with talk about that at all? Because that's another part of the whole journey as well.
For sure. It was really hard. I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this book is because people would reach out to me and say, "What can I do?"
Yeah.
And I just be like, first of all, I don't know. I don't, how are you feeling? I don't know how I'm feeling yet. And so I wanted to have a book that I could give to like the in-laws and the brothers and sisters and say, just read this. It'll explain what I'm going through. And because, people did want to support, but they didn't know how. And sometimes people didn't really know the right thing to say. Like we would get a lot of like, but he's doing okay. He's improving. And it's like, no, he's getting worse. And we don't know why. Eventually we figured out why. But it was a really long journey. And one of the ones that was really hard was, so when's he going to come home? Like, if I knew that, I wouldn't be, posting every day about how he's doing. So others in the book, though, yeah, there were some people who said, I've never talked about this before. Even with my spouse, we've never talked about these things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One of the contributors said that her mother read the essay and told her, like, I had no idea that that's what you were going through. That's how you felt, and that's what was happening. Because when you're going through it, of course, you're trying to be optimistic. You're like, okay, he's off oxygen. Okay, no, actually, he's back on oxygen, but we think he's still doing a really good job. We're really optimistic that things are going to go well, because you're convincing yourself. Like, you're telling yourself things are going in an upward trajectory, and we're going to be out of here soon.
Well, and you probably feel like you have to put a bold, sometimes you probably end up having to comfort other people who are upset on your behalf.
Yeah, I think people in my life were pretty good about not sort of putting their burdens on me. But often it was like, hey, I want to support you. How are you feeling? And I would just be like, I can't even talk about it because that's going to pull me down. Like, all I can say is, I hope we're doing okay. I hope things seem okay. Things seem to be going all right. And a lot of that was for me. I look back now, like my Facebook memories, and it'll be like, look at this little guy. He's doing such a great job. And I remember taking those pictures and being like, that day was like a really bad day, where like, he wouldn't keep anything down. And so I would take these pictures to be like, but look at him. He's here. He's doing okay. He really is, even when he wasn't, I'm not articulating it well, but sometimes you tell yourself these things to keep going. And it just really helped when there would be people who would be like, look, I know it's tough. I know you don't know what's going on. I've been there too. And it's going to be okay. Just keep going. So, yeah.
And that's what your book will help people with.
I hope so.
Hopefully. I actually have a question for both of you. You both have written anthologies, and Melody, you said that you had some stories that didn't fit in your book, which I'm sure was really heartbreaking to decide what's going to go in and what's not. And so what do you plan on doing anything else along these lines where you might use those, or, how do you deal with what's not going to make the cut?
So for me, yeah, that was really hard because I did want to have a range of experiences. And so I had to sort of say, like, I think this one is covered, but this one isn't. So it was about balancing those. If something seemed a little too similar to what we already had, I had to sort of be like, God, this is so hard. So for people who had unpublished pieces, I would say, like, I'm happy to help you get them placed, because I do think that there need to be more stories like this out in the world, not necessarily in this book, just kind of out there. I don't think, I mean, I wouldn't do another anthology about preemies or about birth. I mean, I'm not going to say I would never do another anthology because, you know, I don't want that to come back and bite me. I've heard it's like tattoos where you get the first one, you're just like, oh, that was terrible. I want another though. I do want to keep working and like elevating stories and uplifting voices about prematurity. And I have had so many parents reach out to me already on Instagram, sharing their stories, and I love it. So I want to keep kind of sharing those and keep others who weren't able to make it into the book, like their stories are just as valuable and amazing. Eric?
So I guess I didn't really have the problem with like the Battle of the Bands book that comes out next year. Like we were pretty targeted with who we asked. But with like Welcome Home, when that book sold, you know, I think I only had like, so those stories in that anthology are really short. They're almost like flash fiction. They're like 3,000 words. So we ended up cramming a bunch of authors in there. I think I added like 8 or 9 after the book had sold. And that was a little tricky because we put a call out and a lot of people emailed, ton of people emailed. But then I ended up prioritizing people who had like a personal tie to like adoption and like the foster system. Just because that's what the book was about. So I wanted those like genuine voices and those people who were like ultra passionate. So anyway, it wasn't too painful, thankfully.
I was going to say, yeah, because they're both very personal, you know, personal situations. Sorry, Melody, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, you have like 40 writers in Welcome Home. Is that right? Or is it,
I think it's 30.
30. I have it.
30. Yeah.
She's going to pull it right off her shelf.
Here it is.
Yeah, people wrote really short stories, so it was like, okay, I'm going to keep putting people in there.
The other thing I was going to say about like the sort of personal side of it is, you know, Eric was talking about how when we were approaching publishers that it is really hard sometimes to not take things personally. And I really felt bad for the people who didn't make it into the anthology because I didn't want them to think their story wasn't good enough or like, I don't know, preemie enough, you know, that it wasn't, it was more just like, we have such limited space. So it is really hard. And then for the people who did make it in, like editing their stories, making sure that you have the right touch and not telling people what their experiences were like. You know, I just wanted to make sure that I was really careful with that. And that the edits, you know, there's an editor that I've worked with at 2 outlets now, at The Toast and at Catapult, Nicole Chung. It has taught me so much about editing personal essay. She's only published 3 of my pieces, but I swear to God, like she's taught me a class. And it's about helping people figure out what story they have and the best way to tell it and the best form for it. And so that's what I was aiming for. I would always like channel my inner Nicole to sort of be like, I know you have these stories, like I'm just here to kind of help you sort of like whack with the pickaxe and figure out what we need to uncover.
You know, and sorry if you don't mind me asking a couple of questions, just because I want to. You know, so much of, I'm sorry, let me take that back. I don't know that so much of your writing is long form, but some of the pieces that I've seen are what I would call long form journalism. So did that make it easier for you to do, to work in an anthology kind of format? Is that
I think of myself among writers as kind of like a mid. Like I every time I try to write a 500-word story, it's a 1,500-word story. But you know, I haven't gone long before, and so this is a really easy way to cheat and get a book without having to write 70,000 words.
So is that on your horizon?
God, you know, this honestly, I was like, you know, I just need to get this book out of my system, and then I'll have like published a book and then we're done, like dream checked off. No, like I have to write another book and I want to write one that's all me this time if I can.
So like a fiction one or a nonfiction memoir?
So I do have a novel that I've been tinkering with. Now that, yes, I know, Eric. So now that I have to say, it's like on Pub Day, it was great last week when the book came out, and I was hearing from a lot of readers, and it's like, this is finally out in the world. And the next day, I sat down, and I was like, I think I should do another book. Like, that was fun, but like, what's next? And yeah, I kind of started tinkering with my novel again. But I also would like to write another nonfiction book, just because I really like talking about health and science and parenting, and that kind of very specific overlap.
So I was going to say, I mean, your articles are, to me, so fascinating because so much of them, as you know, we marked on in your bio, you've been to every continent, every populated continent.
You know, and no one. I'm still trying to get to Antarctica.
But I mean, it's just, there's so many things I feel like you could write a book about that would be fascinating amongst all those. So,
well, if you want to talk to publishers,
well, I gotta say though, you know, it sounds like, you know, that you pulled it together quickly. And in this year of 2020 for publishing has just been, you know, Eric, I'm sure you know this too. I mean, has just been a calamity for a lot of writers because, you know, some books got pushed off indefinitely. And I loved what you said about, you know, that this actually being kind of a good time for your book to come out because it does deal with, you know, difficult circumstances, uncertainty, you know, and that's kind of what we're all experiencing right now. But I mean, maybe that's the reason why your book moves so quickly on track there. But it's very hard when you have your book come out and then immediately there's people like me asking you, so hey, what are you doing next?
No. Well, because, you know, I wrapped this book up. I mean, I wrote my essay for it like 2.5 years ago, you know, and like the proposal, you know, I wrote my parts a while ago, and while we were still editing it, you know, it's a little bit of a different process to edit than to write. So I'm like, you know, even before the book came out, I was like, oh, that book, yeah, no, I did that already. Like,
I'm on to something else now.
I'm a serial on to the next thing person. But yeah, I wanted to talk about books coming out in 2020 because I know a lot of authors have had issues either being pushed indefinitely or coming out with not as much resources and fanfare as they'd hoped. And, you know, I would love to be in the bookstore right now doing this face to face. But, you know, we have to do this. And I think it's been really difficult for authors, for booksellers, for publishers. So I just have to say, if you want people to continue writing books and you want to keep reading them, please, please, please support your indie booksellers, everyone, because, you know, where would I be without you? Really. You've really helped me and my family. So.
Oh, well, I want to say that I initially was, as a bookseller, very concerned about having events virtually because I felt like perhaps, you know, we would be missing so much of the interconnection. But I have been surprised myself, and I've heard from other people that they actually feel that this is a more intimate type of event because they can see you close up, they can hear you, they can communicate with you. And one of the things that we have found is that the viewership while the event is going on is usually relatively low, but we get a lot of viewership afterwards. So it does free it up for it does free it up for you know, people who've heard about it from a friend or something, to then be able to go and watch the video of it. And I'm sure other stores have theirs posted as well, but it kind of allows people who might not have the opportunity to get to a store or don't have an indie buy them to still hear directly from an author. So that part of it I do like, but
as the mom of a young kid, like virtual events have been basically one of the best ways for me to feel like I am doing things socially and expanding this. I do feel like virtual events open up, they can be more inclusive in some ways for people who aren't able to make it in person. or at that particular day or time. So yeah, I think it's bedtime up there, if you can hear the stomping. I think someone's pretending to be a dinosaur, and I'm not going to say who. But I do hope that this kind of changes like how we talk about books and how we interact with people. I do think.
And I think it's kind of incumbent upon us as booksellers to make sure that we communicate what a wonderful library we have of authors for people to hear about different subjects. Because it is hard to sometimes hone in on how do you get to the right audience that might need to read this book.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that it takes a while to have enough distance to be able to talk or write about this, experience. That just would be my thought.
Yeah.
Or to read about it. Somebody might not be ready to read about it now, but maybe in a year they would be ready to read about it.
Yeah. One of the things I think, this was in the query letter that I sent to Eric, was I always saw this book as like a choose your own adventure for navigating NICU. That's sort of my little tagline. And it's because like, you might not be ready to read this story, or, you might just want to read one, and that's great. That's one story that you read that maybe helped. And one of the things that we did was in the table of contents, we tagged with different like key terms to sort of help people figure out what might be helpful to them, and what maybe they would want to avoid for now. Because I didn't want anyone to read the stories and feel like there was something unresolved that was keeping them from sort of enjoying the book. If there's something there that they wanted to hear, that they needed to hear, then I wanted them to find it. And if there was something they weren't ready for yet, I want them to put the book down and come back to it later.
Oh, that's great.
I think so. Just because, oh my God, when you're a preemie parent, you're like Googling with such trepidation, and you just hope, my God, that this ends the way you hope it does. When you're reading these stories online, like you see these pictures of babies in incubators, and like you're hearing all these, all these like intimate details, and you're like, yeah, that's me. And then like, and unfortunately, it's just like your day is ruined. And I think that those stories definitely have a place, and they need to be told, and they help people a lot. But you need to know what's coming. Yeah. and that's sort of the danger with just straight online stories, is sometimes you don't have that kind of like editing to sort of do the foreshadowing, and to sort of contextualize the stories. And you'd also talked about writing soon after.
Yeah, well, I would think it could be very raw, and some people that might help them, and other people they might not be ready.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone today on Twitter about this, because their daughter is 4 or 5, I want to say. And she's just saying, like, I'm going through my journals and the blog that I wrote, and piecing together the story finally, because I feel like I'm in the place where I can finally go through all of that, and feel the emotion again and get it on the page. And then I'm ready for it to be on the page and sort of that chapter's closed. And so, yeah, I think everyone has these different timelines. For me, I felt like I had to write it to get through it, to sort of, to close the book, as they say. For me, I felt ready to sort of start. I process a lot by writing. So anytime something happens, I usually just start writing it out. And often I'll go back and read it and be like, well, that's not a story. That's just like, tears on a page, or, angry, like mess. But yeah, so for me, it was like a way to kind of get through it and to put a narrative to it.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said, that one of the contributors said that, was it her? I don't know if it was her mother or her mother-in-law did not even know some of the things that she, put in this article, that meanwhile, here's this book being published. And she has shared this with you, and yet her own family has not, is not aware of all that.
The honor that I feel at sort of being trusted with helping her tell the story and with getting it out in the world, like, oh my God, one of the best feelings in the world. And it's also a huge responsibility because I'm like, wait, your mom didn't know that? Like, and you're telling me that. I love it. That's great. I think sometimes it's easier to tell strangers before it is, especially when you've been going through something.
Yeah.
And especially when you felt like you needed to be strong so you didn't fall apart. And that putting it on the page instead of saying it face to face can often help.
Yeah. Poor Eric. Sorry, Eric. I just kind of shanghaied your discussion there. Sorry. I just got all these questions that bubbled up that I was going to start putting them in the chat box, and I was like, well, I'll just.
No, please. You are very welcome.
I love it.
Okay, so we know Melody's working on a new book. We know you have a book, Eric, coming out in September, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You've written it, right? Like,
so far off.
It's an edit.
Eric, I can't believe your book came out this year.
It did.
Comments, that was in 20. I read that book in 2020.
Yeah.
Like
January, yeah. But it seems like 10 years ago, right? Because the world is completely different.
I have to say it was like one of the best books of the year for me. Loved it. Read it in one sitting. It's great. Comments by it.
If you go to our event page, you can buy Eric's book, and Melody's going to be signing books for us. And yeah, I'm just so excited and thrilled for you. And we miss seeing you. We miss seeing everybody at the store, but we talk about you and Ridley all the time because Ridley used to come and enjoy. I don't know if he enjoyed it. We enjoyed having him at our nonfiction book group.
I think he enjoyed it a little too much. That's why he stopped going.
Melody, we got to give a shout out to Swapna in this too. I see her. She said something in the chat here, but she's the one who nudged me to make sure I saw your pitch letter. And she's here, and I know she's also a One More Page fan.
Yeah, she is, and I felt so silly because I would talk to her I really want to write a book, but I don't want it to be about just me because God, I don't even want to read that. But I want it to be just really diverse and just so many experiences. But how am I gonna write all of that? I don't want it to be a medical book. And she's like, what about an anthology? And I was like. So you have her to thank or blame, whichever you. She's been such a.
Well, thank you, Swapna, for helping us have this book.
Yeah, she says hi.
Any last things you guys want to say before we close it out? Somebody else has something to say.
No, just thank you for having us. This was lovely.
Oh, it was such a pleasure, and it will be up on our Facebook Live and on our YouTube channel. And we'll have a link on the event page for anybody who didn't get a chance to see it tonight. So we're just thrilled. And I was, like I said, sorry I crashed your talk.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has made this book possible. Our friends and family, everyone who supports preemie families, just you all are amazing doctors and nurses and family members and spouses, and I wouldn't be here without you all. And that support is what I'm hoping to sort of convey and in the book. And write the people who write in and talk about what it's like to see their experiences reflected in the book. It's just amazing.
Okay. Well, bye. Bye, Swapna.
Bye.